I started watching a silly Netflix movie, Don't Look Up, about a comet heading towards Earth, and it's not funny, it's not clever, it's not suspenseful, it fails at satire, so I just don't know what the point is. But it did give me the idea to write something myself.
Before the impact, a rock the size of a city is hurtling through space with Earth as the bullseye. It would be detected many months in advance of the impact, possibly years, and almost the exact moment of the impact would be calculable, if not the location. Even if professional astronomers privately shared this information only with their governments, amateur astronomers would soon find the object, and the news would spread. It would cause immediate global panic, then denial, then acceptance. Acceptance would basically mean letting everything hang out. People would drop out of their jobs, their marriages, whatever commitments they had. Paradoxically, those contemplating suicide before the news would perversely be filled with relief and even joy. There would be a global binge in religiosity, bigotry, zealotry, gluttony, debauchery, and every other extreme human behavior. At some point, every kind of retail establishment, from food market to pharmacy to hardware store, would be cleared out and gutted in a frenzy of panic buying and then looting. If the staff already quit, it would just be a free-for-all. There would be virtually no law enforcement. Police would be far more intent on protecting themselves than civic order. Meanwhile, hope against hope, a cadre of many thousands of scientists, physicists, and mathematicians would be calculating and assembling the rocketry required to deflect the object by the minutest amount required to pass the Earth without impact. Money would be no object. The only limitation would be the material knowledge of building giant rockets that are fast enough and big enough to deliver multiple kinetic impacts, or most likely thermonuclear payloads. Even if many rockets of sufficient scale were available, the problem is time. A 0.0001 degree change in trajectory could save the Earth when the asteroid is a 250 million kilometers from Earth. But no current spacecraft could reach that distance between Jupiter and Mars in less than a year. Therefore, the launch of multiple rockets would have to intercept the rock when it was much closer to Earth, well within the orbit of Mars, when vastly more energy is needed to deflect its path from Earth. Attaching multiple rocket propulsion systems on the surface of the asteroid, possibly as suicide missions if the robotics are not ready, would also be tried out of desperation. Whatever the solution, none of them have ever been tested on even a small object in space, so the chances for success on a huge space rock would be remote. Then there is the question of whether, if deflection is too late, breaking the rock apart with thermonuclear detonation, with each piece hitting the Earth machine gun style, would be a worse or better scenario for planetary survival. Let us assume that at some point the 24-hour reports on the next bound to succeed plan fall apart, and the planet is resigned to the catastrophe. Commercials for the latest survival kit will also, at last, fall silent. All notion of organized commerce and financial activity, except for survival, will collapse. The last norms of civilization will fall away. Crazed asteroid Armageddon parties, sexual depravity, violence, and murder would be rampant night and day around the world. Hundreds of thousands would embrace continuous prayer rituals and fasting. Ritual human sacrifice, self-immolation, and mass suicides would be an hourly occurrence. During the impact, numbness sets in, the appointed day arrives, and a general state of fear so overwhelming it resembles acute trauma or shock. A portion of the orderly population in urban areas would be herded into the deepest available spaces in their cities. These would be underground rail tunnels, the deep basements of huge buildings, even sewage systems and catacombs. Most would probably wait it out on the surface, possibly a better alternative. It's unlikely that most would know the full truth of what their fate would be, but many who are realistic would expect to die, probably not as suddenly as seems likely. Around the globe, within 24 hours of the impact, regardless of the point of impact, 95% of the world's population would be dead. The Armageddon asteroid strikes Earth at 20 kilometers per second and drills 40 kilometers into Earth's mantle. It matters little where this impact occurs, ocean or land. About 200,000 cubic kilometers of rock will be instantly liquefied and ejected through the vast vacuum cone created by the asteroid deep into space, some past the moon, halfway to Mars. Much will then fall back to Earth at equal velocity in an incredibly intense, blinding meteor storm. This would superheat the atmosphere within a matter of hours. Maybe 95% of humanity would not hear or even feel the impact, but they would witness perhaps the greatest celestial show of all time before they died. Death would be by radiated heat to the surface and possibly suffocation underground, as oxygen is consumed by the surface firestorms in many places. Hopefully, oxygen deprivation and pulmonary failure will cause unconsciousness before being roasted alive. After the impact, some humans would survive. Most animal life would not. The privileged and the lucky, quote unquote, mostly some government officials and military personnel, would have access to deep nuclear bunkers. But such places are provisioned for a few months, maybe a year. Miners would do well if they stocked their mines well. There's warmth down there and water. They could exist for decades, maybe centuries, evolving their own sub-civilization. Think of the Morlocks in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. But for most of the surviving humans, the picture would be starvation within a few months. Survival for the remnant would be tenuous and the circumstances of their existence unimaginably awful. Most animal species would have vanished, birds almost entirely. Perhaps a few species, mostly farm animals, would be saved in underground caverns. A frantic zoological plan to create an underground Noah's Ark may have been attempted. Terrestrial plant life would recover first because deep roots can regenerate new shoots. Ants, beetles, spiders, cockroaches would have a field day, not to mention rodents, who might inherit the Earth. However, the Earth would be shrouded in perpetual dusk, so that a subarctic climate would set in over most of the previously temperate regions like North America or Europe. Optimistically, a ragtag collection of forlorn survivors would gradually migrate to the equatorial zone, where a temperate climate might enable some agricultural activity to start over. If sufficient number of physicists, chemists, engineers, computer scientists, and other technologists, and don't forget farmers, survived, it's possible they would band together in small groups to begin civilization again.